Ethan and I are expecting. The clapping starts before I put my glass down. Her mother stands first, then her father. My mother looks at me across the table with something between joy and a question she cannot form fast enough. Isolde is standing at the head of a table she reserved, in a private dining room she booked, at a restaurant she selected 3 weeks ago, without asking me once. She raised her glass 2 seconds before she spoke. The room was already leaning in before the words arrived. I do not stand. The word expecting lands in my chest before it reaches my mind, and for 3 full seconds I do not know where I am in the room. My hand tightens around the glass a fraction too long. For a moment, not strategic, just instinct, I almost stand. I take one slow breath. The back of my chair is solid against my spine. Candles along the center of the table throw soft light across faces that are already open and already celebrating. Her side of the table arrived warm. Too warm. They were holding something before she spoke, and I understand now what it was. She planned her own birthday dinner. She framed it as intimacy. The people who matter most, one room, one night. A birthday carries its own social contract. Show up. Be gracious. Do not resist. She didn't pick tonight because she wanted to celebrate. Isolde's eyes find mine through the applause. Her smile does not shift by a single degree. She built this room to be untouchable. 18 months ago, I was not looking for anything. The event was a private investor cocktail following a property launch in downtown Houston. My family's firm had developed the building. I was there because my name was on the project, and leaving early would have been noticed. My father had been gone 11 months. The building was the last project he approved before he died. And my name was on it because his no longer could be. Isolde was standing near the far end of the room with a drink she hadn't touched. She wasn't working the crowd. She wasn't performing availability. She was watching the room the way someone watches a game they already understand. I walked over because that stillness was the most interesting thing in the space. The conversation started without agenda. She knew the Houston development market with a precision that didn't come from research. She had built a prop-tech platform that mapped demographic migration patterns against undervalued urban corridors. The idea was ahead of where the market was sitting. I told her that directly. She didn't thank me. She pushed back on my read of the East Corridor numbers, and she was right. I stayed 20 minutes longer than I planned. We had been in each other's orbit for 3 months. Casual. No definition. She would appear at events I attended, and we would find each other without arranging it. We had shared 2 dinners and 1 long conversation at a rooftop bar that ended later than either of us planned. Nothing formal. Nothing declared. She was at my apartment that night because we had been reviewing her platform deck, and the storm arrived before she could leave. The city went quiet in a way cities almost never do. No traffic, no building hum. Just wind pressing hard against the glass, and a darkness that made the space feel smaller and more honest than it had any right to be. I found 1 candle. She found 2 blankets. We sat on the floor because the couch felt too deliberate. For 6 hours we didn't talk about the platform or the market or the East Corridor numbers. She told me about the 3 investors who passed on her Series A without reading past page 2. She paused once, mid-sentence, and corrected herself. "I'm not used to being overlooked," she said, quieter than the rest. "I don't intend to get used to it." I told her about the acquisition my father handed me at 29 that I wasn't ready for and never admitted to anyone. I believed everything she said that night. At some point past midnight, she said, "I just want 1 room where I don't have to fight to be taken seriously." I remember deciding without saying it that she would not have to fight in mine. That is not a verdict. It is a fact I have returned to many times since and still cannot resolve cleanly. She fell asleep before the power came back. When she woke up, we were something we hadn't been the night before. 2 months and something shifted. I don't know the exact moment she understood what my family's name actually meant in this city. It may have been a conversation she overheard. It may have been a document she came across. It may have been the firm's name appearing in a context that made the scale of it impossible to misread. I was not there for the moment it landed, and she never referenced it directly. What I know is that the questions stopped and the observations started, and there was no other explanation for the timing. For the first 2 months, her curiosity was direct and uncalculated. She asked about the firm, about my role, about how decisions moved through a family operation that size. The questions felt like genuine interest. The kind a founder asks when she is trying to understand the architecture of rooms she wants to earn her way into. I answered without reservation because nothing about her curiosity felt like inventory. Then the questions stopped. She started observing where she had previously been asking. The way she noted which attorney handled the estate at the one family dinner I brought her to. The way she stopped pitching me her platform and started referencing it as something we might build together. I noticed. I didn't assign meaning to it immediately. What I know now is that whatever she discovered that week showed her the actual scale of what the Hawthorne name carried in Houston. Not a reputation. Not a successful firm. Generational capital that had been compounding quietly for 40 years before I was old enough to understand what I had been born into. That was the week the relationship became 2 different things to 2 different people. It started small enough to explain away. 6 weeks after the charity event, she began framing commitment as evidence of loyalty. Not directly. Through inference. A comment about couples who move with intention. A question about where she fit inside decisions I was making professionally. One evening she told me that a man who moves slowly with money moves slowly with everything. I absorbed it. I told myself it was insecurity. I had seen what underfunding does to a founder's sense of time, and I gave her the allowance I would give anyone carrying that weight. Then came the family pressure. She began arranging occasions that required my presence in rooms with her extended family before the relationship had earned that kind of placement. 2 events in 6 weeks. A third scheduled before the second had passed. My deal calendar started bending around her social architecture, and I let it bend because I had decided she was worth the friction. Then the pregnancy announcement landed at her birthday dinner, and every prior pressure point rearranged itself into a single visible shape. I sat at that table and counted backwards. The charity event, the loyalty comments, the family introductions, the birthday dinner she planned without a single question to me. 18 months of patience executed as a sequence, not a feeling. Isolde submitted the merger framework through her attorney 14 days after the birthday dinner. I read it twice at my desk with the door open. The document was formal and precisely drafted. It proposed the consolidation of my development assets into a joint venture firm, cited the pregnancy as the legal basis for the accelerated timeline, and outlined a structure that assumed my agreement without having received it. I didn't read it as enthusiasm. I read it as sequence. The birthday dinner was the emotional pressure. The merger framework was the legal pressure. 14 days apart. Both designed to arrive before I had time to respond to either one on my own terms. I would be a father in a matter of months. That part had settled into me in a way I hadn't expected and hadn't fully processed. But a man can believe he is going to be a father and still recognize when the mother of his child is using that child to accelerate a legal process he never agreed to enter. Those 2 things are not in conflict. One is personal, the other is structural. And the structure existed long before she did. I called my attorney the same afternoon and gave him one instruction. Build a wall around every asset my name touched before the week was out. He asked no questions. He had read the document. I did not call Isolde. I did not change anything visible about how I moved through the days that followed. I attended the dinner she organized that Thursday and sat across from her and listened to her describe the life she had mapped in language that sounded like love. She believed the framework had accelerated everything in her direction. It had accelerated something, just not in the direction she intended. My project director and I ran internal presentation rehearsals before every major investor pitch. Standard practice. It was a video call. He recorded his end of the feed so the delivery team could review timing and narrative before the real room. Nothing about that morning was unusual. I was 20 minutes into the deck when I realized the updated site acquisition slide was on my laptop in the bedroom. The numbers had been revised that morning, and I hadn't transferred the file. I told him to hold and set my phone against the monitor with the camera still running. I walked out of the study and into the hallway. Isolde came out of the bedroom, already on a call, as I walked in. She turned into the study and shut the door behind her. She told the person on the other end that her cycle hadn't cooperated again and that 6 months of trying had produced nothing. I am running out of time watching less disciplined people get funded faster. She said if she didn't have something real by the time the ring was on her finger, she would have to manage a miscarriage somewhere between the engagement and the venue deposit. She laughed once, not at anything funny, but at the audacity of her own contingency, and said his patience was the only variable she hadn't been able to control from the beginning. 31 seconds. That was the duration of what my project director captured on a time-stamped professional recording before she walked back out past me into the bedroom as I came back into the study. I sat down in front of the screen. My project director had not moved. He was looking directly into the camera with the particular stillness of a man who has just heard something he cannot unhear. He looked at me once. Then he looked down. When he looked back up, his expression had shifted into something that had nothing to do with the presentation. "I am very sorry, sir," he said, "but I think there is something you need to hear." She came on a Wednesday night without calling first. I heard the knock at 9:47 p.m. The rain had been steady since early evening, and she was standing at the door with wet shoulders and no agenda visible on her face. No strategy I could identify. Just her, the way she looked the night the power went out, before any of this existed. I let her in without hesitation. She sat on the couch, and after a few minutes she put her head on my shoulder, the way she used to in the early months when everything between us still felt like it had been earned honestly. The rain hit the window in steady intervals. The room was quiet in a way it hadn't been in weeks. I want to be honest about what I was feeling in that room. I was not performing patience. I was not running strategy. I was sitting next to a woman I had genuinely loved and genuinely planned a life around. And for the first time since the recording, I was willing to consider that there was a conversation we hadn't had yet. That maybe what I had built in my attorney's office could stay there. That maybe the version of her on that floor during the blackout was still somewhere inside the woman leaning against me and deserved to be spoken to directly before anything else happened. I was close. Closer than I have admitted to anyone. I considered calling my attorney the next morning and undoing everything I had put in place. Then she lifted her head and told me the venue had confirmed the date for the venture launch dinner. She said the invitations were going out Thursday. She said it the way someone says something they consider already decided. Not a question, not a conversation, just an update delivered to a man she had already filed under managed. The room didn't change temperature. My expression didn't shift. But everything I had been willing to consider 30 seconds earlier closed quietly and completely and did not reopen. My phone buzzed at 10:31 p.m. My attorney. One line. The Nashville Clinic's certified written confirmation that Isolde had never been a patient at any affiliated facility. She was still beside me when I read it. I set the phone face up on the table and said nothing. She didn't look at the screen. She didn't need to. She thought the silence was compliance. It wasn't. She framed it as a venture launch dinner, a formal gathering to announce the joint development partnership between her PropTech platform and my family's firm. The language in the invitation was precise. It referenced both entities by name. It described the evening as a celebration of a merger that existed in her head and nowhere on any document I had signed. 12 investors, both families, 2 journalists covering Houston's development sector. Every person in that room received an invitation that assumed a conclusion I had never authorized. That was the architecture. In her calculation, the pregnancy made the merger inevitable. A child bearing the Hawthorne name was not a personal matter. It was a legal and financial event. It tied bloodline to asset. It made separation expensive and public resistance damaging. She didn't need my signature on the merger documents because she believed a verified pregnancy was a signature no attorney could argue around. The business announcement was the room. The pregnancy was the lock. She had decided I had no door left. I arrived 9 minutes before the first guest. My project director had already coordinated with the venue manager on the AV setup. The screen content was swapped before she cleared the entrance. The toast began at 7:24 p.m. She stood. She referenced the partnership first, then the pregnancy. The room was exactly as open and prepared as she had engineered it to be. The first screen came on before she finished her third sentence. Certified medical documentation, forensic analysis of her altered scan, the Nashville Clinic's written confirmation in institutional letterhead that required no interpretation. She pivoted fast. Clerical error. She said her father moved to stand. Then my attorney placed the merger framework document, her own submission citing the pregnancy as the legal basis for accelerating the joint venture consolidation, in front of every investor at the table. Then the recording played. The room didn't react with outrage. It settled into the specific silence of people who had just understood they were also being managed. I did not wait for the room to finish processing what it had heard. I stood. I buttoned my jacket. I picked up the single document I had brought for myself and I walked toward the door at the same pace I had walked in. Isolde said my name once. The sound of it crossed the room, but I had already passed the threshold and the word had nowhere to land. That is not entirely true. It landed. I just did not let it show. Her family attempted a recovery in the days that followed. 2 calls from her father that my attorney intercepted. A message from her mother, routed through a mutual contact that I did not open. A formal letter from a junior associate at a firm she had retained that my attorney answered in 4 sentences. A message from her that my attorney forwarded without comment. I did not open it. The investors who had been in that room made their own decisions without my involvement. 3 withdrew from pending conversations with her platform within 72 hours. The 2 journalists who had arrived with an embargo published without it by morning. I returned to my office on Monday. My project director had the revised site acquisition deck ready on my desk. We ran the rehearsal we had not finished the Tuesday before, and the pitch closed the following week without incident. The part that stays with me is not what she did. It is what she didn't have to do. I had already run the numbers on her platform and the return case was strong. I had already decided on my own timeline that she was the person I wanted beside me when the next chapter of this firm began. I would have funded her. I would have married her. I would have handed her every room she had spent 10 years trying to earn on her own. She didn't need the plan. She was already inside everything she was trying to take. That is the part I have no clean place to put. Not the betrayal, but the unnecessary of it. The waste of something that was already real and already moving in the direction she couldn't wait for. I chose slowly. I left quickly. That is how it ends. The next story is already in motion. Subscribe if you intend to see it.